So I think we've made a lot of improvement. As people may know, if you look back over the last several decades, I used to head up the state budget office under Governor Thompson, and we passed some major property tax relief provisions in the 1990s, a 10% individual income tax in the 1990s. Those helped reduce our tax ranking. These provisions that I've been talking about will add to that and help us further on the tax front. We know we have more work to do, and despite the income tax cuts in the 1990s, we're still definitely above the national average when it comes to individual income taxes, particularly for middle income taxpayers. We've got a lot of provisions in our tax code that make sure that lower income individuals aren't overly burdened with income taxes. And if you look at our tax rank for people below about 30 or 35,000 of income, we rank in the 30s in the nation in terms of tax burden on people in those income ranges. That rises as we get into the middle income ranges. So over the next few years, we really want to look at ways where we can reduce the income tax burden on middle income individuals. It's not only important to the individuals themselves, but I think it's important to businesses. I mean, I hear from businesses and they say, we're hiring engineers or information technology workers or managers or researchers. We have to pay maybe a little more than other states to compensate for the fact that they're going to have to pay higher taxes. It becomes part of the business's cost structure. So there's a number of reasons why we need to, over the next few years, look at reducing individual income taxes. So that's an important goal for the future, but right now we've made a lot of progress in terms of the taxes that affect businesses. The one other thing I just wanted to mention briefly is that we've also, we're also aware that when you're talking about the tax environment, property taxes are important. And so the budget included some provisions that limited the ability of local governments, municipalities, counties, school districts, put some restraints on their ability to spend and to raise taxes to make sure that taxes would be stable across the state of Wisconsin. And it meant that local governments had to make a lot of difficult decisions in terms of their budgets, just like we had to at the state level. But the benefit for property taxpayers was stable property taxpayers when the bills came out last December, and that'll be the case when the property tax bills come out this coming December. And we looked at the effect on a median valued home in the state. The median valued home property taxes actually dropped by about 0.4%. So a small drop, but very good news compared to the increases that people had seen in prior years. So we know that property tax relief is going to have to be a priority on an ongoing basis. I'll shift gears maybe just a little bit. I've been talking about tax policy and just say, in terms of the way we operate the Department of Revenue, we're also aware of the need to focus on customer service. I mentioned that as one of our goals. So we recently upgraded our website to try to make that a lot easier to use, to get information to file taxes for businesses and individuals. We've launched what we call a plain language initiative. We're systematically rewriting all of our forms and publications to try to make them more easily understandable for people. And we know it's frustrating to get a letter from the Department of Revenue and it's just a page of several paragraphs of very dense text. That's frustrating for people. It results in additional work for us because people call up and say, I can't understand this. Can you help me? Can you help me by explaining it? If we can put the information out there more clearly in the first place, it'll be better for everybody. So we're changing our forms so we use clear headings and put the key points right up front and use bullet points or numbered sequences to explain things, and I think that'll help a lot. We have a customer call center that went through a significant upgrade about 3 or 4 years ago, so we now can answer calls from businesses and individuals quickly. We looked at the time, the people at the department looked at state-of-the-art call centers in the private sector as well as in some other agencies. So I think we've got a very, very good call center operation. And one other thing we did, this kind of gets into how we interact with businesses. Early on, March of representatives from a number of businesses, and it was tax managers, tax professionals, lawyers, and accountants, and just kind of asked, well, what kinds of things should we be trying to improve in terms of how we do business at the department? Started getting a lot of suggestions. Some people said, you know, we do business in other states. They do some things better than you guys. So as a follow-up to that, we just brought in a number of those people to the department, had a lot of our staff there who worked in some of the areas where they'd raised issues and talked about some of those issues. And we ended up forming 6 work groups with equal representation from the businesses and from our staff at the department to look at ways we could streamline our auditing processes, improve the way we assess manufacturing property, things like that. And came up with a list of improvements that we're working on implementing. And I think that's gone very well, but that's the kind of thing we want to be looking for suggestions from businesses, from the public, as well as ideas from our employees about how we can do things better. Maybe before I conclude, I'll just talk about a couple of non-tax topics. And one of them is the state budget. And obviously, in the past year, we have had a very vigorous debate over the state budget. When Governor Walker took office, we had a projected $3.6 billion deficit, the gap between what we were projected to spend under previous spending patterns and the amount we were projected to take in under our tax code as it was then written. So with that kind of situation, the governor really had 3 choices: raise taxes, cut spending without changing operations, so you'd have to end up cutting services, laying off people, or avoid raising taxes, reduce spending, but try to do it in a way that you could avoid mass layoffs, avoid significant service cuts. And the third alternative is obviously the one that the governor chose. It was clearly the best alternative under the circumstances, but it meant we made some changes to how benefits for state and local employees were structured, and some changes to the collective bargaining rules, the work rules that affected employees, so that governments had flexibility to change their operations and opportunities to reduce their costs. And again, controversial, made for some difficult decisions, but the upshot was that we were able to balance the budget without raising taxes, without significant layoffs or service cuts, and with property taxes remaining stable at the local level. So I think at this point, with the benefit of being able to look back over the last year and a half, it was the right choice to make under the circumstances, and it got us through the budget cycle without tax increases, without disruptions to the services people want to see. And another significant aspect of the budget, probably didn't get as much notice, but it was balanced without using any one-time revenues. We didn't use transfers of revenues from other funds. We didn't use one-time federal revenues or things like that to balance the budget. And that means that we've got ongoing revenues and ongoing expenditures at the same level as we go into the next budget cycle. And we won't face a deficit when we go into the budget process with the governor proposing a budget and the legislature considering the budget in the first 6 months of 2013. We'll be able to go into the budget and say, what are the priorities we want to fund? Is it, do we want to put more money into education, or do we want to do some more things as far as tax reform is concerned, or whatever the priorities might be? We'll be able to look at those without having to say, our first task is to engage in crisis management, engage in figuring out how to resolve a deficit situation. So that, I think, is one of the very significant benefits of the decisions that were made in the last budget. We're much better positioned to put a budget together in the next cycle. And I see Roger Federley sitting over there. I used to work with Roger in the state budget office, so he's very well aware of all of these budget issues. Probably having flashbacks, right, when I said talking about putting budgets together. It's never an easy process, but I think we've structured the budget where it's going to be a much better situation than it was in the last go-round. Maybe before I conclude, let me just talk a little bit about other job creation initiatives. As I said, taxes are an important part of that mix, but we certainly understand that they're only one element of the picture. And I was really interested to hear this discussion of workforce issues, because from what I hear from talking to businesses, that is maybe the most significant issue that businesses are facing right now. Is sometimes it goes under the heading of the skills gap. Right now, there are businesses all across the state. I hear it in every area of the state. There are businesses that have job openings that are looking for workers at a time when our unemployment rate is still too high. And you say that's kind of a paradox. There's people looking for work. There's businesses looking for workers. What's going on here, and the explanation for businesses is we're looking for people with certain skills and certain attitudes that we just can't find. So near term, we've got to do, and the Department of Workforce Development is trying to work on this, is try to match people who are looking for jobs with employers who have openings, and see if we can do a little bit better job of matching people with skill sets to openings. But long term, we've just got to produce more graduates from our schools who have the skills and the attitudes and the mindset that our employers are looking for, because there are just tremendous opportunities out there in all sorts of areas of the business sector. And I think a lot of it gets to making kids aware of the skills they need and of the opportunities that are available. And it's really good to hear that stuff about you were talking about taking teachers out to see businesses and get them to understand what kinds of opportunities are there. And I think to the extent we can get kids to see businesses and see how interesting the work is and what kind of opportunities there are. You know, my wife and I have twin daughters who are 13, and when I've thought about this, they've been on field trips to a fire station or to the museums and to parks, but they've never been to a business. And so many of these businesses, you got things with robotics going on or other things. Kids would just find them fascinating if they were exposed to them, but they need to be exposed. And it's especially important as you get into into junior high school and high school, that the kids are aware of these things and that the parents are aware. I mean, one of the things I heard from one session that I was at was that, you know, when the military advertises, they're advertising not just to let kids know about military careers, but to sort of tell parents, hey, these are good careers. So parents need to understand, because some parents have these stereotypes that manufacturing is a dying sector of the economy when it's not at all, when it's a growing sector of the economy. So I think there's a lot more that needs to be done there. And I was in Waukesha County a couple of months ago. The Waukesha County Business Alliance has a program where they're taking kids in every high school in the state into businesses. A number of different businesses have volunteered, so that every high school kid is going to see what's going on in businesses and what kinds of opportunities there are. And Suzanne Kelly, who's the director of the Waukesha County Business Alliance, said, you know, after the first few of these trips, the kids were just, their jaws were just dropping when they found out, A, how interesting some of the work was, and B, what kinds of compensation is available for kids who often have technical college degrees. And I think that's, you know, a couple of the comments made here, it really has come through to me that the idea people have to have in their heads is you need to get some education beyond high school, but it doesn't need to necessarily be a 4-year degree. People have different interests, different aptitudes, and there are different job opportunities there, and a lot of those job opportunities don't require a 4-year degree, and a lot of kids would be much better suited looking at things other than going to a 4-year school. So that message has to get out there. Anyway, we know that workforce is key, and the Department of Workforce Development is really working hard on all of these issues, working with the technical college system, working with State Superintendent Tony Evers and all the other people in the K-12 system. But I think it needs to really be a concerted push, because right now we do have a competitive advantage in Wisconsin of having a more skilled, harder working workforce worse than a lot of other states. I hear that a lot from employers. But we need to make sure we keep that advantage. And to the extent we can solve these problems or address these issues ahead of other states, it's just going to make us better positioned compared with other states. I guess that kind of leads into the other thing, is that there certainly need to be a lot of things done to make sure our schools stay as good as they have been. And Governor Walker's been working with State Superintendent Evers on things like the Read to Lead initiative, which is meant to emphasize the importance of reading skills starting in the very earliest grades. And the one other thing to mention is I talked a bit about the importance of growth companies and how we've made progress getting people to invest in those companies at early stages with the angel investor credit that was implemented about 8 years ago. But the one area where we lag, angel investment, is sort of very early stage investment in new companies that are starting. And a lot of those companies, they grow, need to access additional funds, and a lot of that sometimes comes from venture capital investments. And a little more than half of the states have programs that help make venture capital more readily available to companies. And a lot of people have said we need to do something in that area. And there were some discussions about that in the last legislative session. Things didn't come together, but that is a priority for the next legislative session. There's been some work done on our areas where we have advantages and areas where we can do better in the state of Wisconsin. When you're looking at growth companies, there's a kind of a few factors that make a state a good place for startup companies. It helps to have lots of research going on, lots of entrepreneurs who are ready to start new companies, lots of capital available, and skilled workers available for the companies as they get started and grow. And the feedback we've gotten is that Wisconsin does well in terms of lots of research going on here, our universities and elsewhere. We've got skilled workers, but we don't have as much entrepreneurial activity. We don't have as much early stage investment capital as other states. So we've made progress in those areas over the last 10 years, but those are areas where we still need to do more work.